He's managed some of the world's biggest clubs, as well as 4 national teams, and revolutionised Swedish football in the 1970s, while still managing in the Premier League in the 2020s. But Roy Hodgson does not sit at the same table as Clough, Ferguson, Mourinho, or Guardiola when people discuss managers. A veteran who may not be finished yet, in a near half-century-long career, he has had some truly brilliant highs, but one cannot talk about him without mentioning some pretty disastrous lows. Today, we look at the Premier League's oldest ever manager in The Roy Hodgson Story. Born in Croydon on 9th August 1947, Roy Hodgson came from a working-class background and made it into John Ruskin Grammar School, where he played for the school football team. Here, he was able to get into Crystal Palace's academy. In 1963, with the Glaziers, as they were known then, in England's 3rd division, Palace got promoted this season, and Hodgson never played a first-team game for the now second-tier side. The left-back played non-league football for Tonbridge Angels and Gravesend and Northfleet, but had given up a serious career as a player and had already started his coaching badges. By 23, he had completed them. In 1971, he moved to Maidstone United. His teammate, Bob Houghton, who also went to John Ruskin at sixth form, was a player manager, and Hodgson was player assistant manager. Houghton himself is an interesting figure, often not talked about today, who perhaps deserves his own video. In 1972, they parted ways for now, with Houghton joining the legendary Bobby Robson's backroom staff at Ipswich Town. Hodgson, still a player and wanting to stay part of football, took a training course to become a PE teacher. He thought that was as close as he'd get to a career in football. He joined Ashford Town in Kent and supported himself working as a PE teacher. In 1973, Hodgson would receive an offer to play for money, which at the time he felt he couldn't refuse. It would lead to criticism in the future though. He was playing for Berea Park in South Africa, at the time under the segregationist apartheid government, in the whites-only league. He also trained provincial youth sides, including the Northern Transvaal under-13s. This episode didn't really hinder his career, apart from bring up a few awkward questions in the future. Either way, he only spent a year in Pretoria and returned to England in 1974 for his last playing job at Carshalton Athletic. Meanwhile, his old friend Houghton was taking off. His links to Robson had helped him get a job at Malmö, one of Sweden's biggest clubs, and this would be a springboard for Hodgson as well. In the 1975 Allsvenskan season, Malmö won the Swedish title for the 2nd year in a row under Houghton. At the other end, Halmstad had avoided relegation on goal difference. At Houghton's recommendation, they appointed Roy Hodgson for his first job. Swedish teams used man marking with a 3, or if you prefer 5, back system with a sweeper, but Hodgson would bring in his English style with 4 at the back and zonal marking. The sweeper was gone, with a high line brought in to catch teams offside. At first, the players didn't take to Hodgson. In the freezing Swedish winter, he kept stopping training sessions every few minutes to give instructions. As the players shivered, they thought, "Come on, let us play," as striker Mats Ljungblad is later quoted as saying in the Telegraph. But things finally clicked in a 4-0 win over German side Hannover 96 in pre-seasons. Swedish teams weren't meant to beat German ones, especially not sides like Halmstad, and as the season progressed, it was clear something special was happening. The Allsvenskan didn't know how to deal with a high press, and the results were brilliant. The only exception were games against Houghton's Malmö, because he gave the exact same instructions, and the games were incredibly dull, with both teams crowded round the centre circle. Not that that mattered though. The results in other games were enough to turn Halmstad, a team who were nearly relegated, into Swedish champions for 1976, for the first time in their history. In 2009, an interview with Fulham fan site Fulham Web revealed that he still found his first season in international management to be his greatest achievement, a water-into-wine job. He stayed at Halmstad for a few more seasons. In 1977, Houghton's Malmö won their crown back, and HBK found themselves 8th. They were 8th again in 1978, but in 1979 they won the championship again. It was clear that English Roy and English Bob had revolutionised Swedish football. The traditionalists didn't like it, and other teams often took it personally and played much harder against Halmstad. The Sweden manager also blamed the English style for his team failing to qualify for the 1978 World Cup. Some even called the duo enemies of football. but Halmstad players thank him for it, with midfielder Bengt Sjöholm quoted in the same Telegraph article as attributing Hodgson to Sweden's future success, including the semi-final of the 1994 World Cup. Either way, the debate wouldn't last long, as Swedish coaches would soon emulate Hodgson and Hughton's methods when Sven-Göran Eriksson, another man well deserving of his own video, won the 1982 UEFA Cup with Göteborg. The debate was considered well and truly over. The English star was here to stay, and Swedish football was better for it. The duo left Sweden in 1980, with Hughton becoming manager of Bristol City and Hodgson becoming assistant manager. The Robins were, however, a crisis club. They had just been relegated from the First Division. The financial situation made managing extremely difficult. In a BBC Sport interview, he recalled that weeks into their tenure, the banks had started to pull the rug from underneath the club. A second straight relegation beckoned in the pair's first season. Now in the third division, Hughton still couldn't turn the ship around and resigned in January. Hodgson became manager, but all the players were leaving and all he could do was fulfill the fixtures just about as they got relegated for the third season in a row. With Hughton off to Canada, Hodgson left Ashton Gate and would have to fare alone. He returned to the site of his success, Sweden. However, he didn't find life as easy as his first stint there. He took over struggling Division 2 Södra side Ödeveld and couldn't save them from relegation. His stock was high enough that in the 1983 season he was able to get a role at another second-tier side, Örebro, in the Division 2 Norra, who he guided to a third-place finish, one place below a promotion playoff. In 1984, he got them top of the regular season, but they lost the playoff to Mjällby and thus missed out on promotion. Hodgson was still impressive enough to get Malmö calling after the Blues came a disappointing third in the Allsvenskan regular season and were knocked out in the first round of the new playoffs. The winner of the playoff would now be considered Swedish champions. In 1985, they won the regular season, becoming Allsvenskan's champions, but lost in the playoff semi-finals to Göteborg. In 1986, they won the regular season again, and this time made no mistake in the playoffs, beating AIK 5-3 on aggregate in the final. They also won the Swedish Cup that year. In the Cup Winners' Cup, they reached the quarter-finals before finally losing to Ajax, and won the regular season, but lost the playoff final to Göteborg on away goals. In 1988, he won the regular season and playoffs, beating Djurgården 7-3 in the final on aggregate, before they lost to Anderlecht in the European Cup first round. 1989 was probably his best year in Sky Blue. He won his fifth Allsvenskan in a row, but lost the playoff final to Norrköping. That year, there was no aggregate score. Instead, with each team winning an away leg, a third game was held to decide it, and IFK won on penalties. However, he won another Swedish Cup, and in Europe they lost to Inter in the UEFA Cup, despite a 1-1 draw at San Siro. And then, in the 1989-90 European Cup, they would beat Inter before a disappointing loss to Mechelen of Belgium in the second round. Nicknamed Royson, he is still loved in Sweden today. Malmö built a new stadium in 2007, with the rowdiest bit being the northern side of the eastern and western stands, alongside the northern terrace that connects them. The eastern side is known as Roy's Corner, and the western side Bob's Corner. This is especially notable, as Malmö is hardly a club not used to success, being 23 times Swedish champions. Hodgson was offered a lifetime contract at Malmö after this, but he wanted a new challenge, and also had financial motivations for moving on, stating that Swedish taxes were too high. Perhaps it is no surprise, then, he moved to Switzerland in 1990 with Neuchâtel Xamax. He led them to European football, coming third in the 1990-91 National Liga A regular season, making the Championship group, and then third again in the Championship group. They also beat Grasshopper in the Swiss Super Cup on penalties to win him his only trophy in Switzerland, the last time that competition was ever held. Next season, they came fifth in the regular season, again enough to make the Championship group, where they came second, 2 points behind champion Sion. In the UEFA Cup, he beat Maltese side Floriana and then Celtic, before facing Real Madrid and winning the first leg 1-0, but finally succumbing 4-0 at the Bernabeu. Hodgson didn't actually make the Championship group campaign, however, because after the regular season, he had been approached for the Switzerland national team job, which he accepted. He targeted making the World Cup, knowing that would be a springboard to a top league, according to a recollection in 442. Switzerland's last international tournament had been in the 1966 World Cup in England, 26 years prior. Under Uli Steilaker, they had gotten very close to Euro 1992 in Sweden. finishing just 1 point behind Scotland in qualifying, and Stielike took the role at Neuchâtel Xamax after. Switzerland were placed in Group 1 of European 1994 World Cup qualifiers. 2 teams would qualify out of them: Italy, Portugal, Scotland, Malta and Estonia. Their campaign went well. They won all 4 games against Malta and Estonia, by far the weakest outfits. Away to Italy, they were 2-0 up for most of the game before late goals from Roberto Baggio and Stefano Aranio saved the Azzurri and beat the Italians in Bern. 6 wins, 3 draws and 1 loss was enough to pit Portugal by a point and take the second spot in the US. The Swiss team that went to America didn't contain many stars, with Stefan Chapuisat of Borussia Dortmund probably the most well-known player. 18 of the 22 played in Switzerland, with 4 playing in neighbouring Germany. Still, despite making their first World Cup and major tournament in nearly 3 decades, the Swiss weren't there to make up the numbers. They were a rugged defensive outfit, conceding just 6 goals in qualifying. Hodgson had managed to convince the Swiss clubs to release their players for 2 days a week. They play for their club on a weekend, then go to a Switzerland training camp on Monday and Tuesday before returning to their clubs, creating what he called a club ethos at Switzerland. Nowadays, the importance of the so-called club atmosphere in international teams is often lauded, especially in England, due to the problems of internal rivalry during the 2000s. However, this was relatively novel in the 1990s. 2 teams would go through automatically, and some third-place teams as well. They were in Group A with the hosts, Colombia and Romania. They played the opening game against the US, and the 1994 World Cup is remembered more for what it did for American soccer than Swiss football. However, a 1-1 draw was followed by a very strong 4-1 win over Gheorghe Hagi's Romania. A 2-0 loss to Colombia meant they only came second in the group and play a Spain team that included Fernando Hierro, Chiqui Begiristain and Luis Enrique. After an equal parts controversial and comical opening goal for Spain, Switzerland would go more attacking and it cost them, losing 3-0. Still, it was a success for Hodgson to get there and reach the knockout stages. 4-4-2 described heroes' welcomes for them. Hodgson would stay on for qualifying for Euro 1996 in England, in Group 3 with Turkey, Hungary, Sweden and Iceland. The tournament had been expanded, so 2 teams would progress from the group. As it turned out, Switzerland and Turkey would be too good for the rest, with Switzerland winning the group with 5 wins, 2 draws and a loss. Having qualified for the first time ever for the Euros for Switzerland, he did not go for the finals. He had already taken his dream job at a bigger club, Inter Milan. One player that was winding down his career in Switzerland was the German Joachim Löw. He was massively impressed with Hodgson, who he said revolutionized Swiss football, and the 442 article even claims Löw was inspired in part by Hodgson to become a manager. It probably would have happened anyway, but that is no small praise from a future World Cup winning gaffer. The Nerazzurri were in a somewhat strange phase of their history. At perhaps Serie A's peak, one of its giants were floundering. In 1993-94, they finished 1 point off relegation, but also won the UEFA Cup. Next season, they improved to 6th, but when Hodgson took over in the 95-96 campaign, they were bottom of the league. Hodgson stabilised the team and just about made the UEFA Cup, finishing 7th, just 2 points ahead of Sven-Göran Eriksson's Sampdoria. Hodgson recollected in the Fulham web interview that Serie A was ahead of its time, with less stars but physical machines. Inter lacked stars for the most part, but there was a big exception, Roberto Carlos. Hodgson refused to let him play at left-back, instead deploying him on the wing, and the Brazilian left at the end of the season to join Real Madrid. Something that needn't even be followed with, and the rest is history. Still, even without him, Inter improved to 3rd next season, and made the UEFA Cup final against Schalke, where they lost the first leg in Gelsenkirchen 1-0. In Milan, a late goal from Ivan Zamorano saved them, although an even later red card for Salvatore Fresi meant they'd have to play extra time with 10 men. They survived, but lost on penalties. That Inter side had some real talent, even without Roberto Carlos, Yuri Zhirkov, Javier Zanetti, Paul Ince. Due to the loss, Hodgson was pelted with coins and lighters by fans, and was already going to leave the job. He took his first real job in England, notwithstanding the Bristol City debacle and non-league roles, with Premier League Blackburn Rovers, who had come 13th the previous season. Rovers started the season well and were second at Christmas, with Hodgson taking Manager of the Month for August and December, but collapsed in the second half, losing 8 of 10 games in a stretch from February to April. However, a 1-0 win at home to Newcastle on the final day secured 6th in a UEFA Cup place. In the summer, they sold defender Colin Hendry to Rangers for £4 million, and replacement Christian Daly often found himself injured. £7.5 million striker Kevin Davies failed to fire, and he upset the dressing room by refusing to sell captain Tim Sherwood to Tottenham, and then dropping him. The injuries kept coming, and in November, Blackburn found themselves bottom of the league and out of Europe, following a 3-2 aggregate loss to Lyon in the first round of the UEFA Cup. Hodgson, who 2 months earlier had turned down the Germany job, was sacked after a 2-0 loss at home to Southampton, and Blackburn ended up relegated. Hodgson returned to Inter as a technical director and stepped in as a caretaker manager before returning to Switzerland with Grasshopper. He got them to 4th in the regular season and 4th in the championship group, enough for Intertoto Cup football. He agreed to take the Copenhagen job in Denmark next season. The Lions had come 8th the previous season, but Hodgson led them to the title in the 2001 season, and also took the Danish Super Cup. It sounds remarkable, but this would be the last trophy in his career. He returned to Italy with Udinese. He lasted just months before getting sacked for comments in the Daily Mail to the effect of saying he was happy to be back at the level, but he could have chose a better club. He denied it, but the Pozzo family need few excuses to sack a manager. He later said that he wanted to leave anyway, so he was quite happy that it happened. After this, he spent some more time out of the game, doing punditry work and some technical delegation work for UEFA. Here, we see a more candid Hodgson. He can be a tetchy and defensive man, someone that has often been questioned but feels he has done more than enough. In 2002, during this hiatus, he said, "My track record, if people bothered to study it, would put me in the same category as Ferguson enjoys today. But people don't talk about what I've done outside England." For avoidance of doubt, yes, he did mean Sir Alex Ferguson. It is true that Blackburn hurt his reputation in England, but his record on the continent was good. Not enough to compare him to Sir Alex. Successful in Sweden, Switzerland and Denmark, he still hadn't won a title in a truly big European league, nor won a trophy in Europe. At Inter, he had progressed the club, but couldn't take the final step. Hodgson's next job was an international role, and his first outside Europe, managing the United Arab Emirates. The Whites had struggled, missing out on the 2000 Asian Cup, and finishing bottom in the 2002 Arabian Gulf Cup. Hodgson's team had a pretty simple Group G to qualify for the 2004 Asian Cup in China, with Turkmenistan, Sri Lanka and Syria. They opened with a loss in Ashgabat and a draw at home to the Turkmens, but won all 4 of their remaining games to make the tournament. Before that was the Arabian Gulf Cup in Kuwait, a 7-team round robin involving the UAE, Kuwait, Qatar, Oman, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain and Yemen. His side came 5th and Hodgson was sacked before the Asian Cup. In the Fulham web interview, Hodgson notes that he didn't know where his career was going, but stated that his hard work doctrine helped the lazy Emiratis. He again takes pride in the fact that, unlike most coaches, he wasn't fannying around like most coaches that go there, saying, "It's not in my nature." Pride, much of it righteous, some of it questionable, is of Hodgson's nature. After that, he joined Norwegian club Viking, ending the 2004 season in 9th and earning a UEFA Cup spot through the Fair Play ranking. He managed to get them to the qualifiers in the first round to get to the group stage, where they were knocked out on goal difference. In the league, they were title challengers but missed out by 5 points, coming 5th in a very tight campaign. After this, he took another international job as Finland manager. Finland had never qualified for a major tournament and were in Group A with Poland, Portugal, Serbia, Belgium, Kazakhstan, Armenia and Azerbaijan. Yes, Armenia and Azerbaijan were in the same group. They started well with a win in Bydgoszcz and a draw at home to Portugal, and 7 points in the next 3. 2 losses, away to Azerbaijan and home to Serbia, cost them dearly, and 2 home wins came after that. Of the remaining 5 games, 4 would be 0-0 draws. Roy Hodgson, eh? If they won their last game against Portugal, they would have qualified, but it was a goalless draw in Porto. Still, they had taken a team with Quaresma, Maniche, Pepe and Cristiano Ronaldo all the way. It was a daring run for Finland's first major tournament. Defender Sami Hyypiä stated that they had defended maybe better than ever before. Another obscure job, another job well done. But Hodgson was really put into the limelight in late 2007, where he joined Premier League strugglers Fulham, who were in the relegation zone. He joined just before the transfer window opened and signed a few players, mostly from Nordic countries, including former Viking captain Brede Hangeland. The first couple of months were tough, with 9 points in the 13 Prem games and an embarrassing exit in the FA Cup on penalties to League One Bristol Rovers. With 5 games to go, they were 19th. A 2-0 win away to relegation rivals Reading gave them hope, but they lost 2-0 at home to Liverpool in the next game. With 3 games to go, they were 5 points off of Bolton and Reading, with Birmingham 4 ahead. They visited Manchester City, who were chasing Europe, in the next game, and found themselves 2-0 down. They managed to find 2 goals to equalise in the second half before an injury-time winner from Diamansi Kamara. They were still 3 points off Bolton and Reading, and 2 off Birmingham, with a 6-pointer against the Blue Noses at Craven Cottage to come. They won 2-0 and saw the light. They were out of the relegation zone on goal difference ahead of Reading and 1 point ahead of Birmingham. However, Reading's final day was against Derby County, the worst team in Premier League history. The Royals duly won 4-0, and Birmingham won as well. Therefore, Fulham would have to beat Europe-chasing Portsmouth to stay up. A late goal from Danny Murphy did just that. Hodgson had surprised the world once again, and now he had a full pre-season. Everton's Andy Johnson came in for £12.5 million. Bobby Zamora and John Paintsil came in a joint deal from West Ham for £6.3 million, with other names coming in including Dixon Etuhu, Mark Schwarzer, Zoltan Gera, and a future prospect called Chris Smalling from Maidstone. To go through the whole season would be too long, but it had ups and downs. They ended 2008 with 9 games unbeaten, and it was a pretty consistent campaign. On the final day, they lost to Everton, but a defeat for Tottenham at Anfield meant that the West London outfit finished 7th and qualified for the newly christened Europa League, a remarkable achievement considering how close relegation was last term. The transfer market was modest, but signings included Damien Duff and Jonathan Greening. The season was okay domestically, with ups and downs again. They finished an unspectacular, but still easily saved 12th. He did win Manager of the Month in an unbeaten October and February. In the Europa League, though, something special happened. Starting with qualifiers against Lithuanian side Vetra and Russian team Amkar Perm, they came through a group with Roma, Basel and Česká Sofia. And then they kept piling wins together. Shakhtar Donetsk dispatched in the round of 32. In the round of 16 it was Juventus, and they lost 3-1 in Turin, conceding an early goal in West London thanks to David Trezeguet. Zamora equalised on the night, and then Fabio Cannavaro got sent off. Gera scored 2 either side of half-time, and then Clint Dempsey scored a late winner before Jonathan Zabinic got sent off. Yes, they finished with 9 men, but Fulham still beat a team containing Cannavaro, Trezeguet, Candreva, Felipe Melo and others 4-1. Fulham 4, Juventus 1. Wolfsburg in the quarterfinals were a much simpler proposition, and 2 second-half goals against Hamburg in London sent them to Hamburg, where they played an Atletico Madrid side containing Sergio Aguero, Diego Forlan and Jose Antonio Reyes. They took Los Colchoneros to extra time before a 116th minute Forlan winner finally broke their heart. The result didn't change the narrative around Fulham, however, and Hodgson was named Manager of the Year. He would finally get the biggest chance in his career so far. Liverpool are a big club. They had won their 5th Champions League in 2005 under manager Rafael Benitez and reached the final in 2007. Domestic success was rarer. Runners-up in the 2008-09 league. However, the 09-10 season was a disaster. They came 7th and Benitez lost his job. The club was on the verge of bankruptcy, thus Hodgson was coming into the lion's den. This was a squad with serious quality: Steven Gerrard, Fernando Torres, Dirk Kuyt, Jamie Carragher. Signings include Joe Cole, Raul Mireles and Paul Konchesky. Konchesky was liked at Fulham, but was much maligned as a symbol of Hodgson's low ambition. His time in red was pretty terrible. Notably, the financial issues contributed to the sale of Javier Mascherano. Hodgson's period was absolutely rotten. 1 win in his first 8 Premier League games, including a loss at Goodison Park. 3 wins, including 1 over Chelsea, were followed by 5 losses in his last 8. They were also knocked out of the League Cup on penalties at home to League Two Northampton, who he described as formidable. The strange comments did not endear him to Liverpool fans, who wanted club legend Kenny Dalglish to take over all along. He criticised fans for protesting the dire ownership situation, After a draw at home to Sunderland, he praised the players, saying we deserved our points. As it was clear he was struggling, he snapped back at journalists, justifying that his methods work from Halmstad to Malmö to Örebro to Neuchâtel Xamax, and noted he was feted as one of England's best managers. The thing is, Liverpool fans are a proud bunch. To them, their club is special, unique, different. You can't compare them to a team called Neuchâtel Xamax. That's blasphemy. The loss at Goodison Park, he said it was the best we have played all season. He criticised players and staff when England manager Fabio Capello reneged on an agreement to substitute Steven Gerrard. A fitness coach tweeted his complaints. Hodgson sided against the coach, calling it naivety and frustration. As criticism mounted, he said that he hoped fans should become supporters. To be fair, the fans didn't like him either, and before he had even been sacked, was singing the name of Dalglish. The final game was a 3-1 loss away to Blackburn, the site of his last major failure. Steven Gerrard missed a penalty, and a famous clip from fan channel The Redmen TV suggested that he did it on purpose.
Is putting Blackburn 3 points.
If I scored this, it could be like a fight back like Istanbul, we could win this game. And Roy might keep his job. Ah, fuck that.
Here we go. He's missed it.
Well done, Stevie lad.
Can you believe it?
Given how much he claimed that he was only appreciated abroad, it was perhaps a surprise then that Hodgson got another Premier League job. But he did at West Bromwich Albion. The Baggies were hovering just above the relegation zone following a poor run of games, but after Hodgson's appointment, they lost just 2 of their last 13 to finish a very decent 11th. He thus earned himself a proper pre-season and transfer window. Key signings included Ben Foster, Shane Long and Liam Ridgewell. This was an inconsistent season, which is fine at a club like West Brom. The highlights were truly high, including a 5-1 win away to bitter rivals Wolves and a particularly satisfying win at Anfield, West Brom's first since 1967. He guided them to 10th, but he would not be staying, having already agreed a new job, one even bigger than that at Anfield. He was to manage England. England were in a weird place in 2012. Their golden generation from the start of the millennium had flattered to deceive a bit. It perhaps hit its peak in Euro 2004, a tournament Wayne Rooney set alight, but even then the Three Lions only managed to make the quarter-finals. Under Sven-Göran Eriksson, there was an accusation that it was a team of over-pampered stars. They would spend more time with their celebrity girlfriends than on the training pitch. Eriksson left after another quarter-final exit in 2006, and under Steve McLaren, they managed to fail to qualify for Euro 2008. Under Fabio Capello, the 2010 World Cup was a mess, something that you can view more of on my channel in a video on the topic. Capello kept his job, taking them through the Euro 2012 qualifiers. Today, the main reason given for the Golden Generation's failure was the lack of togetherness. Images of Man United, Arsenal, Liverpool and Chelsea players, all of whom hated each other while fighting title campaigns, sitting apart in the canteen and only talking when necessary. Perhaps no player sums that up more than John Terry. A legendary footballer, still at the peak of his powers, Capello stripped him of the captaincy in 2010 because of rumours of an affair with teammate Wayne Bridges' girlfriend. His replacement, Rio Ferdinand, had a season-ending injury, and Terry was restored in 2011. In 2012, the FA charged him as racially abusing Ferdinand's brother, Anton Ferdinand, and stripped him of the captaincy. He was later found guilty by the FA, but acquitted in a criminal trial. This was an unacceptable threat to Capello's authority. He was to decide who had the armband, and the Italian resigned. That sums up the England setup when Hodgson took charge, a team of stars that were falling and stars that had retired, leading to players filling in the blanks. A player that acted in the way Terry did. Would he really listen to this Liverpool flop? Not picking Ferdinand, even with his injury issues, led to controversy that he was trying to avoid Terry and Rio Ferdinand playing together because of the incident with Anton Ferdinand, his brother. The English press normally roll themselves into a frenzy over the national team before a major tournament, but not with Roy in charge. Most people wanted and expected Tottenham's Harry Redknapp.
Good evening. In tournaments gone by, we would have started with music from Elgar, paintings by Constable, a photo of Terry Butcher's bandaged head and the stirring words of Lord Nelson. but England doesn't expect like it used to.
Roy Hodgson's record as national manager is short but pleasingly unblemished. Played 2, won 2, scored 2, conceded none. Making a hat-trick of wins today, and all that realism and quiet pessimism will go right out the window. As for the French, they're unbeaten in 21 games and start favourites to win this group. But are we intimidated? Well, yes, we are a bit, but let's hope today's the day the tables start turning.
The other fact was that he was thrown straight into a tournament without qualifiers to manage, just a couple of friendlies. England were in Group D with France, Sweden and co-host Ukraine. His squad was still very classy, with Terry, Rooney, Ashley Cole and Gerrard. But it was not a team with world-class quality everywhere, like those that preceded and succeeded his. On the other hand, there was reason to be optimistic, if not for this tournament, then for the future. They had the oldest England squad ever, and the oldest squad, full stop, at South Africa 2010, but now the fourth youngest at Euro 2012, with talents like Scott Parker, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, and most of all, goalkeeper Joe Hart. Terry's partnership with Gary Cahill at Chelsea had led to an unlikely Champions League win. If the defence could be rugged, maybe there was hope. As it happened, Cahill got injured and Joleon Lescott was picked instead. Wayne Rooney was suspended for the first 2 games, but England found a way. It was Lescott that headed home a set-piece to give them a goal and earn a 1-1 draw with group favourites France. Noting England's aerial threat, Hodgson introduced Andy Carroll in the next game against Sweden, and the tall Liverpool man latched onto an improbable Gerrard long ball. "The plans worked," declared BBC commentator Guy Mowbray gleefully. His co-commentator, Mark Lawrenson, in a rare moment of positivity beamed, "That's Andy Carroll." Sweden managed to equalise and then find a lead, but a long-range effort from Theo Walcott and a brilliant finish by Danny Welbeck gave England a 3-2 win. This game isn't really remembered in the England football lexicon, but go back and watch the highlights, you won't regret it. The BBC pundits were beaming.
What you've got to say about Roy is he's actually changed the system tonight, played Carroll up front, played Welbeck up front, both scored the goals. He's changed his system with Walcott in the last half an hour. He's made the difference. So Roy Hodgson has been brilliant.
Rooney returned from suspension for the last game against Ukraine and scored the only goal in a 1-0 win. England had topped the group and would play Italy in the quarter-finals. A rugged, defensive 0-0 draw led to penalty defeat, a common curse for England. Still, it was a good performance against an Italy side containing Buffon, Bonucci, Marchisio, De Rossi and Pirlo. Andrea Pirlo's Panenka is a memorable image today, but really, Euro 2012 was at the minimum a matching of expectations. The team had played well, and no one expected them to win anyway. Next, Hodgson would get a full qualifying campaign. They were in Group H of European 2014 World Cup qualifiers with Ukraine, Montenegro, Poland, Moldova and San Marino. They were unbeaten, but 4 draws meant they took the sole automatic qualifying spot by just a point ahead of the Ukrainians. A 2-0 win at home to Poland in the final game was necessary for victory. Hodgson stated it was his proudest moment, even though he had already qualified for this tournament in 1994 with a weaker team, and England hadn't missed a World Cup since then. Also, in 2013, he stood in as caretaker boss of the under-21s for a 6-0 friendly win over Scotland. England were placed in a tough Group D with Costa Rica, Italy and Uruguay. Gerrard, Rooney and Frank Lampard were the last remnants of the golden generation, and looking back at the team, the squad it was, before any of the next generation had come through. The main exception to this was Liverpool's Raheem Sterling, who would go on to have a dazzling England career. Sterling was the star performer for the Three Lions in a 2-1 defeat to Italy. The fact that England lost, and most people just noted that at least one of the youngsters did well, showed how far expectations had fallen. In the next game against Uruguay, an error by Gerrard allowed Liverpool teammate Luis Suarez to score, and England were confirmed out with a game to spare following Costa Rica's win over Italy in the other game. Hodgson started to become a figure of mockery at this point. Things like his speech impediment and apparent physical resemblance to an owl was low humour. But football fans turn on you when things go badly. He didn't help by describing the 0-0 draw with Costa Rica in a meaningless final game as something for the fans to cheer for, despite the fact that many had paid thousands to watch what was basically a friendly. It's remarkable, looking back, that he stayed in his job, something you can hardly imagine now. In the first friendly after this tournament, only 40,000 showed up to see them beat Norway 1-0, and there were just 2 shots on target. Their goal was from a penalty. When asked about this stat, he called it absolute fucking bollocks. That said, a perfect record in Euro 2016 qualifier, the only team to do so, raised expectations. Group E contained Switzerland, Slovenia, Estonia, Lithuania and San Marino. Hardly the toughest opposition, but normally the sort that would give teams a few problems, especially on the road. Only 3 goals were conceded. Euro 2016 is, of course, well known as England's greatest humiliation. And though the story has been told a million times, it is incomplete to make a video about Hodgson without his greatest failure. So I apologise to England fans watching. First, the squad was interesting, in a good way. Rooney, though far past his best, was still there, but no one else from the golden generation was. However, some future stars had emerged. Tottenham's Harry Kane and Dele Alli had appeared seemingly out of thin air. Manchester United's teenage sensation Marcus Rashford the same, with Sterling having progressed. In addition, after Leicester won the league, Jamie Vardy was also added to complete his fairy tale career. Kyle Walker, another superstar in the making, despite being 26 by this point, was also a major part. It would be giving him probably too much credit to revise what happened in France, to be put in the building blocks in place for the generation, which did so well under Gareth Southgate, however. In truth, it was a pretty awful, tepid tournament. England were placed in Group B with Russia, Slovakia and Wales. In the first game against Russia, England actually were pretty dominant, but it seemed as if some people were perhaps deluding themselves that they were better than they were, when Eric Dyer, himself, at the time an exciting Spurs player breaking through, finally put England in front with a free kick. ITV commentator Clive Tildesley could hardly contain his excitement. "Bang!" he yelled. "Justice for the England 11. Yes, they were dominant, but the fact they only scored from a free kick told his own story, and a late equaliser from a solid but otherwise hardly notable Russia side told its own story. Wayne Rooney was praised for his performance in midfield, a role he had to take due to his falling attacking prowess, still running around and controlling the game. But Hodgson was criticised for replacing him as soon as Dyer scored. The decision to put Harry Kane on corners was also massively panned. England's next game was against Wales in a must-not-lose encounter, and a free kick from Gareth Bale, spilled by Joe Hart, put hearts in mouths. England turned it around with a goal from Vardy and a last-minute winner from Daniel Sturridge. The jubilation, especially as 2 substitutes scored, masked a pretty poor performance. A much criticised 0-0 draw with Slovakia in the final game, with large changes made to rest players, meant they came second. But fortunately for them, a shock-late winner for Iceland in their final game meant that that's who they would play in the round of 16. Iceland were a good team, but utter minnows in football pedigree. Put that level of quality and give them a badge of France, Italy, or even Austria or Denmark, and a loss, while not forgiven, would perhaps not go down in football folklore like what was to come. That's not to say they had more talent than England, because they didn't, and England still should have won. England went 1-0 up from a penalty, and then conceded straight away. In the 18th minute, Iceland made it 2-1, and England spent the whole game finding new ways to fail to score. It wasn't like a classic upset, with comical misses, brilliant saves, woodwork rattling, heroic defending. It was simply a failure to break down a stingy team, and England had probably their worst humiliation ever. Journalists used synthses to give perspective, mostly the USA 1950 game, but the glare of the media was so much bigger compared to 1950. Hodgson resigned at the end of the game, the little things were probed, Kane on corners, and mostly the failure to use Rashford, who came on for injury time and caused more problems than the full 90. You may wonder why I've gone into such detail with his time in England. An example of the little Englander, whizzing through his time at other clubs, whole season was reduced to sentences, while every game gets a paragraph for England. But the fact is that this job means so much in terms of reputation. When he managed abroad, he would be known to football geeks, even when he made the World Cup. Even at Liverpool, the games are watched by fans the world over, on pay TV or illegal streams. But England at a major tournament is different. Nearly everyone in the entire country is watching, on prime time, free TV. Every tournament game is remembered for life. It's true that hardcore fans of Liverpool or Fulham may claim not to care as much or at all about England. It's become a mantra to prove how loyal you are to your club. But people who don't even know what Fulham is will be watching England games with face paint on, bunting up, St George's Cross nails. In the football world and the wider world, Hodgson was forever associated with Iceland, keen on corners and everything else. And sadly, he always will be. It's perhaps unfair, but this was a big chance, and he didn't take it. He was barely heard from for the whole 2016-17 season, but returned in 2017 at Crystal Palace. Palace lost manager Sam Allardyce at the end of that season and appointed Frank de Boer, a legendary Ajax player who also did well as a manager in Amsterdam but failed at Inter Milan, sacked after a few months. He lasted even less time in South London. 4 defeats to start the league season and a 3-0 loss at home to newly promoted Huddersfield meant De Boer was gone. Hodgson lost his next 3, but a 2-1 win over reigning champions Chelsea was soon followed by a run of 8 unbeaten. The team was in a relegation battle still for much of the campaign, but they finished unbeaten in the last 6 to finish an extremely creditable 11th. Under Hodgson and even beyond, the Eagles then became synonymous with a sort of boring stability. Not that that was a bad thing, given how doomed they looked in early 2017. In the 18-19 season, they signed Vicente Guaita and 9.5 million Cheku Kouyaté and came 12th, helped by the huge star quality of Wilfried Zaha, who he somehow managed to keep in South London during his tenure. In 1920, Jordan Ayew and Gary Cahill came in, while fullback Aaron Wan-Bissaka was sold to Manchester United for £50 million. At the time of the COVID interruption, they were 11th, but lost 7 in a row after the restart and finished 14th. At the next season, he made a big signing in £16 million Eberechi Eze from QPR, something that paid off, while he also nabbed Jean-Philippe Mateta on loan in the winter. His side finished 14th again. He finally stepped away from Palace at the end of the season, although he stated that he wasn't definitely retiring. Never say never. In 2021, he also got a significant civilian award in the UK, being named Commander of the Order of the British Empire, or CBE. The Pozzo family, his former employers at Udinese, sacked Italian Claudio Ranieri as Watford manager in January that season, with the club in the relegation zone. Hodgson was appointed to replace him. This was pretty disastrous. 8 points in his first 9 was pretty bad, and he then managed 1 point in the whole rest of the season. A loss away to Crystal Palace confirmed the drop, and he summed up his time when he waved to the Palace fans, laughing with Zaha, but ignored the Watford ones. He was pretty hated by the time he left at Vicarage Road, and he never seemed to take any responsibility for the drop. Hodgson would hate being out of football, and would often spend time meeting with his assistants, England, Watford and Palace, Ray Lewington, talking about the game and perhaps discussing a return. So a good opportunity announced itself in 2023. In March, Eagles manager Patrick Vieira was sacked, and Hodgson took the job to stabilise things for the end of the season. They had not won a league game in 2023, but won 5 of their remaining 10 to stay 11th. At his advanced age, by now the oldest manager ever in the Prem, on 3 separate spells, his first at Palace, Watford, and now this return to South London, it was expected that this would be the role he would be limited to, brief end-of-season fireman positions, but he started the 23-24 season. Signings include Jefferson Lerma and Dean Henderson. The season was pretty mediocre, with the Eagles 14th at New Year's. A 5-0 loss to Arsenal in the first league game of 2024, followed by further defeat to rivals Brighton as well as Chelsea, led to Hodgson's position being rumoured about. He was then taken ill before a training session and reported to have stepped down. In fact, he may well have been pushed anyway. Moreover, at the end of the season, he received the John Duncan Award for his long service. It's impossible to say if that truly ends the tale of Roy Hodgson. A football obsessive, it is probable that some other job will tempt him at some point, even at 76. A common sentiment is that he is perpetually underrated, forever besmirched by experiences at a financially struggling Liverpool and an England team full of overpaid millionaires who had a tantrum when things didn't go their own way. But as a manager, it is your job to solve these issues or adapt to them, and he didn't. It should be noted that after all this time at this levels of the game, he has 7 Allsvenskan titles, 4 of which made his team Swedish champion, 2 Swedish Cups, a Swedish second-tier regular season title when he failed to get promoted in the playoffs, a Swiss Super Cup, a Danish title and a Danish Super Cup. A lack of any European trophies, despite 2 finals, any international ones, despite 4 roles, or any in UEFA's current top 10 leagues, show a lot. This is why he is not talked as one of the great managers, and in reality, he isn't even particularly close. But when he went off the beaten track, he was a great success. He helped professionalise and even revolutionise Swedish and Swiss football, introducing new methods which turned them into respectable, if not spectacular, footballing nations. But when he was in leagues and environments that were already at a high level, his records were mixed. Sometimes he saved strugglers, like when he turned around Fulham and Crystal Palace, but sometimes, as at Watford, he was powerless. For the successes in international management with Switzerland and Finland, there was a bitter period with England. His persona as an unfashionable, underrated coach makes him liked in some circles, but his strange comments and undoubted pride, which sometimes spilled over into the territory of arrogance, made him hated at others. Hodgson is an accomplished manager, but things always held him back from being a true great. Give me your thoughts on Roy Hodgson. Did you learn something new in the video? Is he always unfairly treated because of what happened to England and Liverpool, or is the criticism justified? I'm interested to hear your thoughts because this is a debate I hear quite a lot actually, so comment below. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you for another video on possession football soon.